January 19, 2017, Tehran, Iran. A 55-year-old building that had stood as a symbol of modernization is engulfed in flames. Firefighters battled the blaze for over 3 hours. Then, without warning, the entire 17-story structure collapses in seconds, live on state television. 20 firefighters killed instantly. But here's what they didn't want you to know. This wasn't just a tragic accident. This was the result of decades of corruption, ignored warnings, and a construction industry where profit mattered more than human life. And it was about to happen again. Today, we're diving deep into Iran's engineering disasters, where buildings don't just fail, they kill. From the iconic Plasco Building to the deadly Metropol collapse, we're uncovering the shocking truth about what happens when corruption meets concrete. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change how you look at the buildings around you forever. To understand the Plasco disaster, we need to go back to 1962. Tehran was in the midst of rapid modernization under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. A Jewish Iranian businessman named Habib El-Ghanaian had a vision to build Iran's first true skyscraper, a symbol of a modern Iran entering the global stage. He named it the Plasco Building, after his pioneering plastics manufacturing company, Plasco Car. At 17 stories tall, it dominated Tehran's skyline. It featured a shopping mall, commercial offices, and a rooftop restaurant with 360-degree views of the city. This wasn't just a building, it was a statement. But even then, controversy followed it. A Shiite cleric named Mahmoud Talangi protested the idea that a Jewish family owned Iran's tallest building. The building represented the cultural tensions of a country caught between modernization and tradition. Then came 1979. The Islamic Revolution changed everything. Habib El-Ghanaian was arrested, put on trial for less than 20 minutes without a lawyer, accused of espionage, and executed. The government seized the Plasco Building and handed it over to the Islamic Revolution Mostazafan Foundation, an organization tied to the Revolutionary Guards. The decay begins. For nearly 39 years, the building operated under this foundation, but maintenance, safety inspections, these became afterthoughts. By 2017, the Plasco Building was a shadow of its former glory. The ground floor housed a shopping center. The upper floors were packed with clothing workshops. Hundreds of workers crammed into spaces filled with highly flammable materials. And here's the critical detail. Fire extinguishers were empty. Clothing was stored in stairwells, a direct violation of safety standards. Warnings from fire inspectors were ignored. The fire brigade spokesman, Jalal Malakias, later stated, "Even in the stairwells, a lot of clothing is stored, and this is against safety standards. The managers didn't pay attention to the warnings." A government report issued in April 2017 confirmed that the Islamic Revolution Mostazafan Foundation had ignored warnings from authorities, and that government ministries had failed to enforce 22 national building regulations. 22 regulations ignored. The day of disaster. January 19, 2017, 7:58 a.m. local time. A fire starts on the 9th floor, likely from an electrical short. The building is occupied. Residents, garment workers, even tour groups being shown around this historic landmark. 10 fire brigades respond. 200 firefighters race to the scene. For more than 3 hours, they battled the flames. The building's lack of sprinkler systems means the fire spreads rapidly through the clothing workshops. The structural steel, unprotected by fire-resistant coating, begins to heat up. Some firefighters are inside the building. Others work from elevated aerial platforms outside, spraying water onto the flames. State-run Press TV is filming live. They're capturing what they think is a routine, albeit serious firefighting operation. At 11:20 a.m., disaster strikes. The collapse. The north wall fails without warning. The weakest link in the structure, the beam-to-column connections, reaches critical temperature first. Thermal expansion creates massive forces. Columns buckle. In just seconds, the entire building pancakes downward in a vertical collapse. The firefighters on aerial platforms have no chance. Those inside are buried instantly.
The collapse is so complete, so catastrophic, that it's captured in a single horrifying sequence on live television. Final toll: 20 firefighters dead, 26 people total, over 70 injured. Tens of thousands of Iranians attended the funeral ceremony at Tehran's Grand Masala. The firefighters were laid to rest in the section of Behesht-e-Zahra Cemetery reserved for martyrs. Ayatollah Khamenei called them heroes and shaheeds. But here's what they didn't talk about at those funerals: what the investigation revealed. Structural engineers from Tarbiyat Modarrez University conducted a comprehensive investigation. What they found was damning. The building had lack of adequate continuity, ductility, and redundancy to resist the spread of damage. The structural steel members were unshielded, exposed directly to fire. The connections between beams and columns were the critical failure point. In a properly designed building, there's redundancy. If one element fails, others can carry the load. The Plasco had none of this. The government's own report stated that the foundation had ignored warnings and that 22 national building regulations weren't enforced. But accountability? Consequences? The Mustadafan Foundation issued an apology but claimed they weren't responsible for the building's day-to-day operations. No one went to jail. No systemic changes were made. Twitter erupted with calls for Tehran Mayor Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf to resign. The hashtag trended across Iran, but he remained in his position. The message was clear. In Iran's construction industry, warnings could be ignored, regulations could be flouted, and when people died, accountability was optional. The Plasco was rebuilt and reopened in 2021, but the lessons? Those remained buried with the dead. Fast forward 5 years. May 23, 2022. Abadan, southwestern Iran. Another building, another disaster. But this time, the corruption was impossible to hide. The Metropol Building was one of 2 twin 10-story residential and commercial towers. It was only 4 years old. Advertised as earthquake-proof with a hardened concrete structure. The holding company behind it had run lavish commercials on Abadan's state TV station, enticing people to buy property in what they called a modern, safe residential complex. At 12:40 p.m., with no earthquake, no fire, no external cause, the building simply collapsed. The immediate aftermath. More than 80 people were trapped under the rubble. Construction workers who weren't even insured, shoppers, residents, children. Among the victims, 12-year-old Malika Salehanpour and her 14-year-old sister Mitra, along with their aunt-in-law Fatime Kalfizadeh, a 32-year-old mother of 3 who traveled from Sarbandar to see a doctor. The girl's classmates later placed Malika's photo on her empty school desk with a bouquet of flowers. As rescue operations began, something remarkable happened. The Iranian people didn't wait for the government. Local residents started pulling people from the rubble themselves. But instead of supporting these efforts, authorities dispatched anti-riot units to prevent protests. The final death toll? 43 dead, 37 injured. The web of corruption. This is where the story gets dark. The Metropol was owned by Abdul-Bahi Holding, run by Hussein Abdul-Bahi, a businessman with deep connections to the Revolutionary Guards and high-ranking officials. According to the state-run Khabar Online website, from months ago there were reports of the building's main columns sinking and the ceilings of various floors sagging. Months of warnings. Firefighters had warned the city and the holding company about an imminent tragedy. The head of the state construction engineering organization revealed that the Abadan municipality had issued a construction permit without even informing his organization. Here's the most shocking part. The Metropol received its permit after the head engineer of the oversight team continuously refused to sign it. His response? He was fired. The revolving door of corruption. Abdul-Bahi had close ties to many government and city officials. Some reports link him to Ali Shamkhani, secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. The formula for his success, according to the state-run Fidos website in 2020, smart management and establishing relations with state entities along with rent opportunities and forming ties with political and administrative figures. In other words, corruption. The IRGC's Khatam al-Anbiya construction headquarters, the regime's free trade organization, the Khuzestan governor's office, and Abadan municipality all provided Abdul-Bahi with real estate confiscated from ordinary people. Abdul-Bahi himself had allegedly written a book titled How I Turned the Ruins of Abadan and Khorramshahr into My Own Personal Wealth. Let that sink in. He was literally bragging about it.
The cover-up. Initially, media reported Abdul-Bahi had been arrested. Then the story changed. He died in the collapse, they claimed. His body was supposedly found in the rubble. The public didn't believe it. Many suspected he had escaped with the help of the same corrupt officials who had enabled him for years. Adding fuel to the fire, the Khuzestan province prosecutor had filed documents for his arrest just before the death announcement. To this day, the truth about what happened to Abdul-Bahi remains murky. The protests. But the Iranian people weren't having it. Protests erupted across Khuzestan province and cities throughout Iran. When Hossein Hamidpour, the mayor of Abadan, arrived at the collapse site, locals attacked him and forced him to flee. People blamed him for authorizing the construction despite numerous technical deficiencies. Protesters chanted death to Khamenei in Abadan, Khorramshahr, Tehran, Shiraz, Bushehr, Yazd, and dozens of other locations. The regime responded with bullets and tear gas. Riot police dispersed crowds. Security forces showed up at vigils to prevent them from turning into protests. On state television, the governor of Abadan cautioned people to only follow official media and avoid rumors on social media. Ayatollah Khamenei waited 3 days before releasing a statement expressing condolences. Then, in a televised address, he accused enemies of Iran of causing unrest to overthrow the state. It was the same playbook. Tragedy occurs, people demand accountability, government blames external forces. The second collapse. Here's how bad it got. In October 2022, 5 months after the initial collapse, the remaining portion of the Metropol Building fell down. The Revolutionary Guard had been responsible for clearing the debris. Workers were on site. The second collapse killed at least 1 person and injured several others. Even in death, the Metropol continued to claim lives. Now here's what makes this truly terrifying. Plasco and Metropol aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a systemic crisis plaguing Iran's entire construction industry. Ahvaz, December 24, 2024. December 26, 2024. A 6-story residential building in Ahvaz, Zaytun-e Karmandi neighborhood
collapses after sustaining damage from a 5.6 magnitude earthquake 10 days earlier. Officials claimed no casualties because the building had been evacuated after warnings of instability. But think about that. They knew it was unstable, did nothing to fix it or properly secure the area, and celebrated when it collapsed because at least no one died this time. Tehran, August 2023. 5 buildings under construction collapse simultaneously in southern Tehran. At least 4 people killed, including 2 police officers who were overseeing a legally ordered demolition of a nearby building. 11 others injured. The officers had no warning that surrounding buildings would fail. The scale of the problem. Let me give you some numbers that should terrify anyone living in or visiting Iran. In Tehran alone, there are currently 33,000 unsafe buildings. 60% of buildings in Tehran don't comply with seismic safety standards. 20% of Tehran's buildings would completely be destroyed in a magnitude 6.5 or larger earthquake. Thousands of structures sit directly on fault zones, including about 1,000 high-rises over 12 stories. Tehran's mayor, Alireza Zaghani, admitted in interviews that they blocked the release of the list of unsafe buildings, saying, "If we release it, no one will stay in the city." Read that again. The government knows which buildings are death traps, but won't tell residents because it might cause panic.
The root causes. So what's causing this epidemic of failure? It comes down to 5 interconnected problems. 1. Corruption in permitting. Building permits are sold to the highest bidder, regardless of safety compliance. Developers can literally buy extra floor area ratio or height, a practice called selling density. This became widespread under Tehran Mayor Gholam Hossein Karbashchi in the 1990s and continues today. Engineers who refuse to sign off on unsafe projects, fired. Officials who demand compliance, sidelined or transferred. 2. Ignored seismic codes. Iran established its first seismic building code, Standard 2800, in 1988 after the devastating Manjil earthquake. It's been updated multiple times, most recently in 2015. The code exists. The problem? Enforcement is a joke. Informal settlements around Tehran completely ignore building codes. Studies show that most buildings in these areas are unreinforced masonry assembled with heavy materials without any lateral load design, exactly the kind of construction that kills people in earthquakes. 4. Lack of oversight. The agencies responsible for building inspection are understaffed, underfunded, and often corrupt themselves. Multiple government ministries share responsibility, creating a bureaucratic maze where accountability disappears. When disasters occur, officials blame local corruption, while the systemic problems continue. 5. Revolutionary Guards involvement. The IRGC's Khatam el-Anbiya construction headquarters controls major construction projects across Iran. This creates a situation where the same organization that's supposed to secure the country is profiting from shortcuts and corruption in construction. Following the ceasefire that ended the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, the Revolutionary Guards became increasingly involved in Iran's economy. Today, they function as the largest holding company, with firm control over construction and real estate. The human cost. Behind every collapse are real people, real families destroyed. 2 young girls from Minudasht who went to Abadan with their mother to see a doctor. They sat in the Metropol Building while their mother went to the pharmacy. They never came home. Firefighters who rushed into the Plasco Building to save lives, following orders, trusting that their equipment and training would protect them. 16 of them were buried when the building came down.
Construction workers at the Metropol who weren't even insured, working on a building they probably knew wasn't safe, but needed the job to feed their families. Iran's seismic time bomb. And here's what makes this exponentially worse. Iran is one of the most seismically active countries in the world. It sits on the Iranian plateau at the juncture of the Eurasian plate and the Indian plate. Major fault lines run directly through population centers. The 2003 bomb earthquake killed over 26,000 people. The 2017 Kermanshah earthquake killed about 600 and injured over 9,000. Tehran hasn't experienced a major earthquake in over 150 years. Seismologists say it's not a question of if, it's when. When that earthquake comes, and it will come, those 33,000 unsafe buildings in Tehran, they become mass graves. Now you might be thinking, I don't live in Iran, why should I care?
Here's why this story matters beyond Iran's borders. Lesson 1. Corruption kills. When building permits become commodities to be bought and sold, when inspectors can be bribed or intimidated, when regulations exist on paper but not in practice, people die. This isn't unique to Iran. We've seen similar patterns in the Champlain Towers collapse in Florida, where maintenance issues and warnings were ignored for years before 98 people died. We've seen it in Turkey, where substandard construction contributed to the deaths of over 50,000 people in the 2023 earthquake. We've seen it in the Grenfell Tower fire in London, where cost-cutting on fire-resistant cladding led to 72 deaths. Lesson 2. Buildings don't just collapse. The Metropol Building didn't fail because of an earthquake. It didn't fail because of a fire. It failed because humans made deliberate choices to prioritize profit over safety. Every building collapse is a choice to use substandard materials, a choice to ignore warnings, a choice to approve permits for unsafe structures, a choice to not enforce regulations. Lesson 3. Accountability matters. After Plasco, no one went to jail. After Metropol, arrests were made, but the systemic issues continued. In October 2022, months after the Metropol collapse, Iranian filmmakers Mohammad Rasulov and Mustafa Al-Ahmad were detained for appealing to security forces on social media, not to suppress protests. The regime's message was clear. Questioning authority is more dangerous than building death traps. Lesson 4. Transparency saves lives. Tehran's mayor admitted they won't release the list of unsafe buildings because it would cause panic. But that secrecy doesn't make buildings safer. It just ensures more people are living in danger without knowing it. The public has the right to know if the building they live in, work in, or send their children to school in is safe. The solutions exist. Here's the frustrating part. None of this is necessary. The engineering knowledge to build safe structures exists. Iran has the expertise, the resources, and the technology. The problems are political will, enforcement, accountability, transparency. Academic research following the Metropol collapse identified 13 lessons that should be learned. Periodic inspection of high-rise buildings before, during, and after construction. Prevention of systematic corruption in construction projects. Decisive action against officials who approve unsafe buildings. Proper incident command systems for disasters. Management of bystanders during emergencies. Assignment of projects to committed organizations. Equipping provinces with proper rescue equipment. Permanent safety managers in high-rise buildings. Serious consequences for those responsible for collapses. Strengthening risk communication.
But knowing what needs to be done and actually doing it are two different things.
The Plasco Building stood for 55 years as a symbol of Iran's modernization. When it fell, it took with it 26 lives and any illusion that iconic status guarantees safety. The Metropol Building was only 4 years old when it collapsed, advertised as earthquake-proof, state-of-the-art, a modern investment. It was a lie built in concrete, and 43 people paid for that lie with their lives. Across Iran, tens of thousands of buildings are structurally unsound. Millions of people live and work in structures that wouldn't survive a major earthquake. The government knows this. They have the lists, they have the data, but they've chosen silence over safety, profit over people, corruption over compliance. The next disaster isn't a question of if, it's when. The earthquake is coming. The fire is waiting. The structural failure is just one overloaded column away. And when it happens, we'll see the same cycle repeat. Shock, grief, promises of investigation, arrests that lead nowhere, and ultimately, nothing changes. Because in a system where corruption is structural, where accountability is optional, and where the powerful are protected, buildings aren't just poorly constructed, they're death traps with permits. If this story opened your eyes to the critical importance of building safety and accountability, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into engineering disasters and what we can learn from them. Share this video with anyone studying engineering, working in construction, or living in areas with seismic activity. These lessons could save lives. Drop a comment below. Does your country enforce building codes? Have you ever worried about the safety of a building you live or work in? Remember, every building you enter is the result of thousands of decisions. Make sure someone is making the right ones. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Iran's water crisis isn't just Iran's problem. It's a cautionary tale for the entire world. As of 2026, the crisis continues to deepen. Tehran's main reservoirs hold barely 13% of capacity. The Lar Dam, one of the city's primary sources, is at just 1%. Nationally, 19 to 22 major dams are functioning at 15 to 20% capacity. Power generation has been disrupted. Water rationing is widespread. And the environmental damage from decades of mismanagement, dried wetlands, collapsed aquifers, subsiding land, toxic dust storms, will persist for generations. But here's what every nation can learn from this disaster. Lesson 1. Geological reality cannot be ignored. No matter how politically convenient or economically attractive a project appears, if the geology won't support it, it will fail. Always. Conduct comprehensive, independent geological and environmental assessments and actually listen to them. Lesson 2. Water has limits. In arid and semi-arid regions, structural solutions alone cannot create water sustainability. Demand management, conservation, and adapting human activity to available water is essential. Lesson 3. Environmental impacts are economic impacts. The Gotwand Dam may have generated hydroelectric power, but the downstream agricultural damage likely exceeds any economic benefit. The true cost-benefit analysis must include long-term environmental consequences. Lesson 4. Institutional structures matter. Water management requires unified authority, long-term planning horizons, and the power to say no to unsustainable projects, regardless of political pressure. Lesson 5. Traditional knowledge has value. Iran's ancient Qanat system sustained civilization in arid lands for millennia because they worked within hydrological limits rather than trying to exceed them.
Modern engineering combined with traditional wisdom creates better outcomes than either alone. Today, parts of the world are watching Iran's crisis and thinking, that could never happen here. But similar patterns are appearing globally. Overexploited aquifers in California, India, and Saudi Arabia, shrinking lakes from the Aral Sea to the Dead Sea, dam building booms in Southeast Asia and Africa. The engineering is impressive, the ambition is understandable, but unless we learn from these failures, we'll repeat them. The Gatwand Dam still stands, producing electricity, releasing poisoned water downstream. Lake Urmia remains a salt desert. The Karkay Dam operates at fraction capacity. These monuments to ambition have become monuments to hubris. The question isn't whether other nations will face similar challenges, it's whether they'll learn from Iran's mistakes or repeat them. If this video opened your eyes to one of the world's most critical infrastructure failures, hit that like button and subscribe. We're uncovering engineering disasters and the lessons they teach, from mega-project failures to environmental catastrophes. Drop a comment. What other engineering disasters should we investigate? And if you want to understand more about water engineering and environmental science, check out the links in the description. Remember, every major engineering project started with ambition. The difference between success and disaster is whether we're willing to listen to the limits of reality. Until next time, think before you build.